Something has changed in you, and you still haven't been able to name what it is. It wasn't the hair, it wasn't the clothes, it wasn't any visible change you can point to in the mirror, but the people around you are reacting differently, looking differently, staying longer, approaching for no apparent reason, asking for an opinion when before they didn't even consult you, treating your words with a weight that didn't exist before. And the strangest thing of all, they can't explain why. You notice they are trying to decipher it, that they keep watching you, looking for what changed, and leave the conversation without an answer. But you know something is different. You feel it inside. A firmness that wasn't there before. A clarity in the eyes when you look at yourself in the mirror. A calm that isn't indifference. It's something else, something deeper. As if you had found a ground that no one can take from under your feet. And the question you are carrying, the question that brought you to this video is this: what is happening to me? I will answer you. And the answer will be more concrete, more biblical, and more scientifically solid than you are expecting. Because what you are experiencing is not a social coincidence. It is not developed charm. It is not self-confidence built by personal effort. It is a process that has a name, that has mechanics, that has precedent in the scriptures, and that contemporary science is only beginning to map. And when you understand what is truly happening, everything will make sense. People's attention, the repulsion toward what no longer belongs to your life, the peace you can no longer trade for drama, the authority that appeared without you having asked for it. Stay with me until the end, because this video will give you the vocabulary to name what you are living, and what has a name, you know how to protect. First, I need to ask you a question that will require honesty. How long ago were you a completely different person from the one who is here now? I'm not talking about years. I'm talking about versions. The version that said yes when it wanted to say no. The version that spent hours ruminating on what someone had said about you. The version that adjusted its own opinion depending on who was in the room. The version that needed external approval to feel whole. That version went through something. Perhaps a loss. Perhaps a betrayal you didn't expect from where it came. Perhaps a long period of silence, of invisibility, of feeling that no one was looking at what you were building. Perhaps a crisis that put you on the ground, and you had to discover what was beneath everything you judged yourself to be. And from this process you emerged different. Not perfect, not without scars, but different in something that goes deeper than behavior, different in substance, different in what you emanate when you simply enter a room. UFOMG published a study on social presence and interpersonal attraction that reached a conclusion that will surprise you. The researchers wanted to understand what makes certain people be perceived as magnetic by social groups without presenting physical attributes or status obviously superior to others. The result was clear. The determining factor was not appearance, vocabulary, professional position, or economic status. It was what the researchers called manifest internal coherence, the perceived degree of alignment between what the person believes, what they feel, and what they communicate. People with high internal coherence were evaluated by groups as more trustworthy, more attractive, and more worthy of attention, even before speaking a single word. Manifest internal coherence. This has an older name. It has a name that appears in biblical Hebrew that will change the way you understand what is happening in your life. The word is kabod, K-A-B-O-D. Most translations bring kabod as glory, and indeed that is how the word appears in most biblical contexts. But when you go to the Hebrew root, you discover that kabod is not an abstract concept about divine light in the sky. It is a word with physical, literal weight. Kabod comes from the root kaved, which means heavy, with substance, with mass, with gravity. The glory of God, in the original Hebrew understanding, is not something that shines in a vacuum. It is something that has weight, that has measurable physical presence, that affects the environment where it manifests. When the kabod of the Lord filled the tabernacle in Exodus 40, the text says that Moses could not enter, not out of fear, but because the presence had physical weight. It filled the space in a way that the human body needed to adapt to endure. And it is exactly this concept that explains what is happening to you. When God refines a person, when He puts someone through the process of real sanctification, He does not add shine to the surface. He increases the kabod, the spiritual weight, the internal substance. and this substance has a measurable physical effect on the environment. People around perceive the weight before intellectually processing what they are perceiving. That is why they keep trying to decipher what changed, because what changed is not visible, it is palpable. You didn't get more handsome or beautiful in the mirror. You became heavier in the sense of kabod, and the world feels this weight even without knowing its name. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on the bell, because the next video will continue exactly from what we are building here, and what is coming will be one of the most revealing contents this channel has ever brought about how you operate with authority in a new season. Don't miss it. Now I want to introduce you to a process that the Bible describes with a precision that will leave you breathless. The Hebrew word is saraph, T-S-A-R-A-P-H. Saraph is the verb used to describe the work of the goldsmith, the process of subjecting the precious metal to fire with the objective of separating the pure from the impure. In the metallurgy of antiquity, the goldsmith knew the process was complete when he could see his own reflection clearly on the surface of the metal. When the metal was sufficiently purified, it functioned as a mirror. The face of the goldsmith appeared without distortion. Zechariah 13:9 uses saraph to describe what God does with his people. I will refine them as silver is refined, and try them as gold is tried. But observe what the verse does not say. It does not say that God will destroy what is impure. It says he will refine, separate, purify. The saraph process does not eliminate the metal. It increases the concentration of what is pure. The metal does not shrink in the fire. It becomes more itself. And when you went through the things you went through, when you went through the fire that seemed too unfair to have a purpose, what was happening at the spiritual level was not punishment. It was saraph. Separation of what was impure from what was essential. Elevation of the concentration of what you truly are. And now that the process has advanced, what people are seeing when they look at you is exactly what the goldsmith sees when the work is reaching the right point. The reflection of something cleaner, sharper, more real. Harvard Medical School published a systematic review on what they call transformed physical presence after experiences of severe adversity. What researchers documented in survivors of high-intensity crises, significant losses, and prolonged periods of isolation was a measurable alteration in indicators of nonverbal presence, body posture, eye contact pattern, speech rate, and what researchers called attention density. That is, the ability to be completely present in an interaction without attention leaks in other directions. People who went through saraph, through real refinement, consistently presented higher rates of attention density, and social groups automatically and non-consciously recognized this as authority, as weight, as something worthy of attention. Science is measuring the kabod, but now I need to show you a biblical story that most people know by the outcome and never stop to see by the process. The story of Esther. Esther was an orphaned Jewish young woman, raised by her cousin Mordecai in a foreign land, in a time when being Jewish and being a woman at the same time already severely limited what was socially possible for a life, without a father, without a mother, without position, without apparent resources. And she was summoned to the palace of Ahasuerus as a candidate for queen. What many people skip in the narrative is the process that preceded the presentation to the king. The text of Esther 2 says there were 12 months of preparation, 12 months of treatments with oils, perfumes, and specific care before she could be presented to the monarch. But it is not about physical beauty that this process speaks. Any shallow reading of the story stops there. Esther's deeper process was not what happened to the skin, it was what happened to the identity. Esther was a young woman who had learned to hide who she was. Mordecai had told her not to reveal her nationality or her origin. To survive in that environment, she had built a version of herself that fit the expectations of the place, a survival identity. And Esther's real journey was not from maiden to queen. It was from hidden identity to revealed identity. The narrative climax of the book is not when she is crowned. It is when she goes to the king without being summoned, risking her own life, and says, "I am a Jew. This is my people, and I will hide no longer." The authority that saved Israel was not born from the crown. It was born from the moment Esther stopped negotiating her own identity for safety. And what does this have to do with you? Think of the years in which you adjusted who you were to fit into spaces, to be accepted, to not create friction, to not be too much. Those were Esther's 12 months, not because they were a waste, but because they were the period where you learned the environment without completely losing yourself in it. But now something has changed. You stopped negotiating, and that is exactly the movement that the world around perceives without being able to explain. It is not arrogance. It is not distance. It is the presence of one who is no longer asking permission to be who they are. And this, at the level of Kabod, has a weight that transforms any environment you enter. Like this video now. Not because it is a formality, but because this content needs to reach people who are in the middle of the process, who are still in the 12-month period, and need to know that what seems like long preparation is, in fact, necessary refinement. Like it and help this word find those who need it. There is data from PUCRS on social behavior and mental health that very few people know, but which is fundamental to understanding what is happening to you now. The research followed for 3 years a group of adults between 38 and 62 years old who had gone through significant personal crisis processes, divorce, job loss, bankruptcy, grief, or a serious health diagnosis. What researchers wanted to understand was what differentiated those who emerged from these processes with what they called increased presence density from those who emerged with reduced presence density. The results showed that the differentiating factor was not the intensity of the crisis. It was what researchers called narrative integration, the individual's ability to build a coherent reading of the crisis that included it in the arc of their own identity, instead of treating it as a rupture or interruption of identity. In other words, the one who emerges heavier from a crisis is not the one who suffered less. It is the one who learned to include the suffering in the story instead of treating it as a pause in the story. This is Tsaraf in academic language, and the practical implication is this. The attention you are receiving now is not a random bonus of life. It is the measurable result of an integration process that happened in you. People around you are not reacting to something you decided to do differently. They are responding to something you have become. But there is a dimension of what is happening that goes beyond your personal presence. And this dimension is the one that matters most to understand the period you are entering now. There is a word in biblical Hebrew that appears especially in contexts of separation and consecration divine. The word is Nazir, N-A-Z-I-R. On the surface, Nazir is often translated as separated or consecrated, and is associated with the Nazirite vow described in Numbers 6, where an individual consecrated themselves completely to the Lord for a period, abstaining from wine, from cutting their hair, and from contact with the impure. But the root of Nazir goes deeper than the external vow. Nazir carries the idea of something that was separated not only from certain practices, but for a specific function. It is the separation that defines the destination. The Nazir was not just someone who abstained from things. It was someone who had been marked by a difference in purpose that made certain approaches automatically incongruent. And it is here that something you are living will gain a very precise name. You notice that certain people simply left your life. Certain situations that used to attract you now have no appeal. Certain environments where you previously felt at home now seem too narrow, too noisy, too empty. And you didn't force any of these exits. They happened as a natural consequence of something that changed inside. This is the Nazir mechanics operating in your life. When God separates someone for a new function, He does not only open doors in front. He installs at the level of the spirit a field of discernment that begins to operate automatically. What does not belong to the purpose begins to become incompatible with your frequency. Not because you became arrogant, not because you think you are better than anyone, but because the level of alignment you have come to inhabit naturally repels what operates at a different frequency. Like the magnet that does not choose what it attracts and what it repels, you do not need to actively manage this separation. It happens as a law. And what remains after this natural separation is exactly what will sustain what lies ahead. Relationships of real depth, opportunities that have true alignment with your purpose, environments where your Kabod does not need to be contained to fit. Now I want to tell you about someone who understood the Nazir in a way that cost a whole life to learn. The prophet Daniel? Daniel was taken to Babylon while still young, torn from his land, from his context, from his family, from everything that constituted his cultural and religious identity. And the strategy of the Babylonian kingdom was exactly that, to reformat identity, give new names, new food, new education, new cosmology. Daniel's name was changed to Belteshazzar. The names of his companions were also changed. Everything was done so that at the end of the process, they would no longer know who they were before. But the text says something that most people do not stop to consider. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. An internal decision, before any result, before any validation, before knowing if it would work. Daniel purposed in his heart. And at the end of the training period, the text of Daniel 1:15 records something extraordinary. Their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the portion of the king's meat. Their faces were different, visibly, measurable to those who looked, not because they had eaten better, because they had remained whole. And in chapter 10, when Daniel receives a vision of great intensity, the celestial messenger who appears to him says something that will resonate directly with what you are living. Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand, and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard. From the first day. The answer had been released since the first day that Daniel purposed in his heart. The delay in manifestation was not a delay in divine decision. It was the period of Zareph, the period where what Daniel carried inside was being purified to the point where the messenger could bring the complete revelation. And when the messenger arrived, he said something about Daniel that summarizes what I am going to tell you now. Thou art greatly beloved. Not you were approved, not you passed the test, not you deserved the answer. Greatly beloved, Daniel's position was not one of merit. It was of positioning in the love of God. And it is from this positioning that Daniel's luminosity, the one that was visible on his face, the one that made satraps and governors perceive that there was something different in him, originated. Not from effort, from love received and remained in. Go to the comments now and write the word marked, just that. M-A-R-K-E-D, because this word is a declaration. It is you saying, I recognize the process that passed through me. I recognize the Zareph. I recognize the kabod that is being built. I am Nazir, separated for a function that I am beginning to understand. I am greatly beloved, marked. Now I need to tell you about the aspect of this process that scares people the most. Visibility. Because there is a contradiction you are living now that seems to have no resolution. On one hand, you are being seen in a way you never were before. People are noticing you, seeking you, treating you with a weight that you are not sure you are capable of sustaining. On the other hand, there is a part of you that still keeps the memory of when you were invisible, when no one looked, when you spoke, and no one listened, when you needed the attention that is now arriving so much. And these two states coexist within you, creating a specific type of vertigo, as if you didn't quite know if you can trust the new visibility, as if you were waiting for everything to suddenly go back to what it was before. This has a name in psychology. Researchers at UFRJ who study self-esteem dynamics in identity transition contexts call it perceived status dissonance. The gap between the status that the environment begins to attribute to the individual and the status that the individual still attributes to themselves based on memories of previous periods. In simple terms, the world has already updated the perception it has of you. You are still updating the perception you have of yourself. And the most important work you have to do now is not for the world. It is internal. It is to update your own reading. It is to learn to inhabit the level of kabod that is manifesting without unconsciously looking for ways to return to the size of before, because the size of before is the only one that seems safe. Greek has a word for the transformation that happens when the internal form finally corresponds to the external reality that God prepared. The word is metamorpho, M-E-T-A-M-O-R-P-H-O-O. It is the word that appears in Romans 12:2, translated as, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. But metamorpho is not an exchange of identity. It is a revelation of identity. It is the butterfly that did not become a butterfly. It was always a butterfly. What happened was that the form that always existed inside finally found expression outside. And the renewing of the mind that Romans speaks of is not an intellectual process. It is the process of learning to see yourself the same way God sees you, of stopping processing the present through the categories of the past, of inhabiting the level that was prepared for you without feeling like an imposter in it. Because the version that the crisis built of you is no less real than the version that existed before the crisis. It is more complete. It has more kabod. It has more zaraf. It has the nausea that the experience installed. And the world is seeing this before you. Princeton University published a study on natural leadership perception that revealed something that complements everything we have seen so far. The researchers discovered that groups identify natural leadership not through conscious analysis of competencies, but through what they called projected internal state reading. In fractions of a second, the group captures the emotional state and the level of internal coherence of the individual and uses this reading to calibrate the degree of attention, trust and influence it will attribute to them. What this means: the people around you are reading your kabod before processing any word you say. They are responding to the substance before responding to the content. And when the substance is real, when it was refined by the real zaraf, the group's response is automatic, involuntary and consistent. You don't need to convince anyone of who you are now. The field around you is already communicating that before you open your mouth. But I need to tell you something that will require honesty on your part. This level of visibility has a responsibility that goes with it. When you carry kabod, when the weight of the divine presence begins to operate through you, you become an environment for the people who seek you. They don't just come seeking information or advice. They come because they feel that what is in you can stabilize something that is in motion in them. And this is a calling, not a burden, a calling. Daniel did not use his distinction to ascend socially within Babylon. He used it to be a point of reference in the midst of the kingdom's chaos. His distinction was functional to the purpose, not ornamental to vanity. Esther did not use her access to the king only to ensure her own safety. She used it to interpose her body and her voice between the decree of extermination and her people. Her position was functional to the purpose. And what is being built in you now, the kabod, the zaraf, the nazir, the metamorpho, is not for your personal satisfaction of finally being seen. It is so that you can be, for someone specific, what Elijah was for the widow of Zarephath, what Daniel was for the Hebrew youths in Babylon, what Esther was for Israel. A fixed point in the middle of a world that finds no stability. And here is the data that definitively closes the scientific argument. The HeartMath Institute, which for decades has researched the relationship between cardiac states and interpersonal influence, documented that the human heart emits an electromagnetic field that extends up to 1.5 meters around the body and is measurable by high-sensitivity equipment. When the heart is in a state of coherence, which functionally corresponds to states of peace, love, and gratitude, this field affects the cardiac state of other people who enter it. In practical terms, when you enter an environment in a state of coherence, of kabod, of shalom, you are literally altering the field around you in a way that other people's bodies detect before any word is said. This is not a metaphor. It is measured, it is reproducible, it is physics. Your calm is a field, your peace is a field, your presence is a field. And this field is doing exactly what the biblical text describes, attracting what is aligned and repelling what is not. You did not create this field. You were refined until you could carry it without distorting it. Now tell me something. Think about the last few weeks, about the last conversations, about the environments where you have been. Have you begun to perceive this field operating? People who arrive, things that leave, dynamics that change without you having done anything deliberate. If so, you are recognizing the process, and recognizing is the first step to consciously cooperating with it. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this today. Someone who is in the middle of the zaraf and still doesn't know the name of the fire they are going through. Someone who is confusing the refinement process with punishment. Someone who still hasn't understood that the invisibility they are living now is the contrast that will make the following shine undeniable. Share it. Be the instrument of God's kabod in the life of someone you love. Before closing this video, I want to give you 3 things concrete for you to carry from here. The first, learn to inhabit the level without apologizing for it. The perceived status dissonance that the UFRJ research identified has a practical solution. You stop behaving as if you were visiting the level where you are and start behaving as a resident, not out of arrogance, out of recognition of what the process produced. Stop minimizing your weight when you speak. Stop subverting your own authority before anyone can question it. Stop apologizing for occupying the space that was refined for you. The second, take care of the field as if it were your most precious possession. The Nazir understood that consecration required maintenance practices, not out of superstition, but because what was separated for a specific function needs to be guarded from the contamination that would compromise that function. For you, this means deliberate attention to what you consume in terms of content, company, conversations, environments, not isolation, discernment, not distance from people, distinction of frequencies. The third, use the field intentionally. You now have a resource that did not exist before, a weight of presence, a field of coherence, and you can consciously choose where and to whom you take this field. Daniel chose to be a point of reference for the Hebrew youths. Esther chose to use access to the king to intercede for her people. What is the intercession that your Kabod is being called to make? This question does not need an answer today, but it needs residence within you. It needs to stay there, growing until the answer becomes obvious. You have come this far, and that is not small. Most people will listen to the first minute of a video like this and decide it is emotional self-help. But you stayed. And staying, in the context of what we discussed today, is already an act of recognition. It is you saying, I know something is happening to me. I know there is a name for it, and I want to understand so I can carry it with more awareness. Go there in the comments, write Marcado. 1 word. Just that. But this word is a milestone. It is you saying to heaven and to your own spirit, I recognize the process. I recognize the Zarif. I recognize the Kabod. I am Nazir. I am being metamorpho. And what is coming after me, as I remain in this alignment, does not belong to me by effort. It belongs to me by destiny. Marked. And in the next video, I will show you something that will complete what was built here. How you begin to operate with authority from this new level of presence. How the field you carry translates into conversations that open doors, into relationships that have real substance, into opportunities that arrive already aligned with what you were refined to do. How the Kabod is not just something people perceive in you, but something you learn to mobilize with intention and responsibility. This next content will be step 2 of everything you understood today. Turn on the bell, keep an eye out. And don't be late.